Hello, this is the Commercial Landscaper Podcast with Robert Clinkenbeard. This show will transform your leadership by developing all areas of your life, business, family, personal, and health. Only by fine-tuning yourself will you truly operate at a highly functioning leader. Super excited today to announce that we've just surpassed the 100th edition of the Commercial Landscaper Show. And we're going to see better things from this year. We're going to be introducing some education, courses in leadership and sales that you could apply and join and try to improve yourself. So hopefully you can join us in some of these courses and reach out if you want to hear some new guests. This is all about bettering you, bettering your business, and make you function at a super high level. Thanks again, everyone. Cheers. Hi, this is Robert Clinkenbeard with the Commercial Landscaper Podcast. I'm really excited today to be joined by Chris Lee with Earthworks. Chris, thanks for joining the show today.
Thanks, Robert. It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
No problem. It's good to see you again. I always enjoy seeing you at some of the industry events. So
Yes,
thanks
sir.
for joining me today. So this is your first podcast, so I'm gonna take you in nice and easy today.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about background about you. Just I have probably over 5,000+ subscribers in the US, Canada, Europe, Australia. So I'd love them to hear a little bit more about your background.
Sure. So my background prior to joining the landscape industry actually had nothing to do with landscape or horticulture. I did grow up on a farm as a kid through high school. So agriculture has always kind of been part of my life, but not necessarily horticulture. So I started off in more of a sales industry, and kind of worked my way up through management. So my real background prior to landscaping has been in customer service and in sales, which I think is great for people out there to know that as long as you find people that can fill in the weaknesses or the shortcomings that you have. You don't necessarily have to have a horticulture degree. You don't necessarily have to have an advanced degree in landscape architecture or anything like that to be very successful in this business. It's like most businesses, it fundamentally just comes down to taking care of your customers and doing the right thing.
No, I agree with that 100%. In fact, towards the end of my business before I sold, we actually hired people that were more from outside the industry because of their attitude, because they had great customer service. And, we had so much heart knowledge within the business, it was easy to teach them that. So I think
we've actually on about 3 different occasions put down an edict that we're not hiring anybody with landscape experience ever again. We backslide a little bit. We find a good candidate.
Well, the problem is that so many of them come with baggage from not so good companies. So.
Yeah. Well, they come with baggage of either substandard practices or substandard quality of work, substandard customer response, or frankly, we get a lot of them that have come through some of the bigger companies that have they've just been through a meat grinder. They're just beat down as people. Like they don't trust anybody. They don't trust anything. They think the world's coming for them, and those are actually the more difficult ones to deal with. Is you can teach people to kind of get their standards up, but when someone comes in kind of mentally broken from what they've been through with some of these big national companies, it's that's a tough one to overcome for sure.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah. So I know when I came out to see you a number of months ago out in Texas, you have a huge company out there, ton of employees. I know one of your big focuses is on apartments, but as you continue to grow every year, I know you probably have some. Almost every conversation I have with somebody in the business, they're talking about labor issues, either increasing wages or trying to find employees. What have been some of your challenges, and how have you started to overcome some of those challenges?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's an expensive answer, I think, ultimately. So we've used H-2B as a supplemental labor source for more than 20 years now, probably 22, 23 years. In the beautiful thing about the program is that it does what it's supposed to do. In years where there's a lot of available labor, there's not a lot of people using the visa program. Visa people aren't hard to get. And years where the economy is really tight and there's no workers available, then pressure gets put on the program and more people use it, which is exactly what it's supposed to do. unfortunately, with the cap that was set back in the 80s, it's not always sufficient for an economy that's basically tripled in size since then. We've still got the same numbers. So we've determined over the last 5 years that it's just not something that we can rely on. Which is tough, because it's, for us, we bring 100 guys a year. They're experienced guys. They're some of our best and brightest, but we don't know from year to year if they're coming. So it's really forced us to do really a couple of things, Robert. One of which, is probably the most obvious answer is, hey, you got to recruit more, you got to pay more attention, you got to pay more money, you got to advertise differently, you got to do something unique on that front. In the thing that we found through kind of a little bit of trial and error, and honestly a little bit of frustration on my part, like I said earlier, I come from a sales background, and we have meetings with our HR staff and try to coach them up on, hey, we've got this great package to offer. Let's get excited when these people come in the door. Let's really sell them on our company. Ultimately, the long and short of it is most HR people are great at a lot of things, but sales isn't one of them. By nature, they're, detail-oriented paperwork people, people that are checking boxes and making sure compliance issues are there. But they don't typically have that sales mentality or that enthusiasm or that willingness to ask additional questions after someone says no. So we had a kind of in a moment of frustration, I basically said, we're not doing this anymore. I'm taking recruiting away from HR, and I'm hiring a business development person, because this is a sales job. We have to sell people on our company is the place you want to work. We have to have somebody that's passionate about it, and somebody that when someone says, no, I'm not interested, can take it a step further and go, well, why not? What would you be interested in? What would we have to do? And I tell you, that right there, that change in mind shift from recruiting being a function of HR to it being a business development function, it can't tell you how much of a difference it's made. Our HR department wasn't happy about it at first, but now they can't say anything because they see the results. I mean, the results are just black and white.
So yeah, they're not the ones seeing the frustration out in the field. If you're 10, 20, 30 people down, it's either your clients are seeing it or your fellow employees, which is probably then going to affect retention.
Well, and that's kind of how I finally got through to our HR director, was that, it's like, exactly that. I'm like, if you understood the damage that not having employees causes to everybody else in this company, then you would understand why I'm doing this. And I hope you take some time to think about it, because it's not about you and your ego. It's not about me and my ego. It's about, this devastates the company. This is the biggest problem we have, and we're going to do whatever we have to do until we find an answer for it. We're not going to stop. And like I said, now we're 9-10 months into it, and the writing's on the wall. We're able to hire people. Everybody's on board with it, and even HR gets it now. That, hey, yeah, that's this. We do need more of a salesperson in this role, and HR still does their part. They still do the onboarding. They still make sure everything's compliant, but that initial point of contact and that initial person, having like I said, a more of a sales type person in that role has been huge for us.
No, that's great. I love where you're coming from. That, I mean, that's something that, to be honest, I've been preaching for the last 2-3 years, during COVID, where, obviously so many things have changed in the industry and other industries, and you almost have to have that out of the box type thinking. And yes, HR people are great at certain things, are great at following protocol, they're great at following rules, the law changes, but in terms of trying to find new employees, 100% that's a sales role. And if you could have somebody in that, in fact, I've even heard companies now, they've now hired 2 or 3 different sales or recruiters within their company, depending on who they're going after. And they found some tremendous success.
Yeah, we're running our own job fairs. We're doing all kinds of stuff we've never done before. And just having that mentality, it's one of those things as an owner, you're like, you feel like an idiot after the fact. You're like, why didn't I see this? Especially me, I'm a sales guy. That's what I do. Why didn't I see this before now? But sometimes those points of frustration give you a little bit of clarity.
Yeah, for sure. Has that helped at all? I mean, if you've now got I don't know the numbers, but if you've got now a sort of fairly regular flow of employees or bench going of employees coming in, has that helped to keep your wages somewhat at bay? Because some people are seeing 20, 30, 40% increases and wages.
Yeah, no, so there's a lot of pieces. The recruiting piece is part of it, but we still have competitors offering, and that's one of the things in the landscape business that is a little tough, maybe compared to other industries. Is see, it is such a low barrier for entry, and you have companies, like us that we have 400 employees. We're very compliant. We follow all the rules, but we're competing against guys with 10 or 12 employees that they're cashing checks and handing them cash on Friday. Which obviously lowers your cost of doing business. It also allows you to pay a little bit more. So we've had to stay on wages. We've had to stay on, because the other side of the equation is, you have to hire people, but then you have to keep people. For every person you keep, that's one less you have to hire. So we've actually kind of doubled down on that, and we're doing as much internally as we are externally. Everything from events to we've increased PTO at every level. We've increased pay at every level. Like, remember at the beginning of this, I said the answer is expensive.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you're charging more though.
Yeah, we are charging more. Yeah, and that's a blessing of being established as we are, and we've got a good track record. Is sometimes we don't have to operate strictly on price. Obviously everybody has a budget to a degree, but we've kind of long ago left the trying to be Walmart category, and we're going to provide great value, but we're not going to be the cheapest guy around. And we have been able to get some decent price increases. It's hard to increase prices as fast as labor and fuel and things like that have been increasing, but we're making it. We've been through hard times before, like everybody out there that's listening to this has, and you just got to persevere and just the focus on the daily grind when things get tough.
Yep.
The other thing, if you don't mind on this subject, the other thing that we have tried to do that may be helpful is we've kind of gone into it with the assumption that we will not have the visa guys. So we kind of started 4 or 5 years ago going, hey, so how would we do this if the visas just wasn't a thing anymore? And so we decided, well, obviously we can't add 100 people in 1 month when our season starts March 15th or April 1st, onboard them, train them. That's just not possible. So the only way we would be able to do it would be, maybe realistically we could add 25 in December, and maybe then we could add another 25 in January, and then maybe we could add another 25 in February. That's a number that we could reasonably recruit and onboard and train. The problem is we traditionally don't have work that time. Things do go dormant here in DFW. There's nothing to mow. There's nothing to trim. So we've been very intentional about trying to change our business model a little bit and push more work into January and February, from cleanups to mulching to hardscape projects. We've gone as far as to incentivize clients to let us do the work early through discounts or through extended billing. Like, hey, I know you got this budgeted in May. If you'll let us knock it out in January, you can pay for it in May. And we've even adjusted to the point where we've taken on a couple of big projects that we really make nothing on. But they're projects that are consistent, repetitive projects we can do every January and February. They're going to keep 25 guys on payroll paid. They're going to pay for the trucks. They're going to pay for the fuel. We're not going to make any money on it, but that allows us to be one step closer to where we need to be April 1st if the VC guys don't show up. Now, the VC guys show up, which they did this year, that creates a whole nother problem. Now you're heavy on labor, which is something that 4 or 5 years ago I didn't think I would ever have to deal with again.
Right.
But it gives you options to go out and start selling harder, selling faster. And it also, frankly, we've been in a situation where we've been held hostage a little bit. We've got employees that probably in a different circumstances may have been let go for behavior, may have been let go for lack of production, or no shows, no calls, things like that. And you get to a point where you're so short staffed, you start looking at those things a little differently, as hard as you try not to. But it has enabled us to kind of cut some dead weight, so to speak, and really focus on the core guys that we need to keep around. So it's an expensive problem, but it's one, if you really break it down into pieces and look at all the alternatives, it's one that you can handle. It's one that you can adapt to. And if we ever get H-2B certainty, that's just that much better. We've learned to work it both ways. So if H-2B turns into something that we can count on year in, year out, great. We've got a brilliant backup plan for when we need it.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, it sounds like, I mean, what's interesting about what you're seeing, and again, it's been something I've been, I suppose, harping on for a while, is that, when you look at landscape companies, traditionally, it's, 50, 60% of the costs are labor, but very
Yep.
few companies have a true strategy around recruitment or dealing with employees or looking at that seasonality. But it sounds like you've made some great strides into bringing on recruiters, figuring out the whole challenge with winter work and that slowdown. So yeah, I mean, that sounds like you're making some great moves. And have you seen the true results of that yet, or is that something that's still you're
Yeah.
monitoring?
Yeah, it's definitely working. The recruiting's working, the engagement's working. Here's something else that I think is pretty neat that we're doing, and we're just now getting started on this. But so we put this plan together. You always look for metrics, or you always look for things you can track. And with employees, you can kind of track, turnover. You can track hiring. You can track things like that. But there's so many different things that go into that it's kind of tough to always know if that's the validity, I guess, of the data. So one of the things to measure what we're doing internally that we've done is we partnered with Gallup. Everybody knows who Gallup is. They're a giant company. And we are utilizing them to do employee engagement scoring for us. We just finished our first round, where essentially they've got a real simple questionnaire. It's 10 questions. We got it, obviously English, Spanish, whatever language the guys need it. And it kind of gave us a benchmark as far as, hey, here's the percentage of engagement we have at every level. So we've got it by division, by branch, by employee level. And so now we've got these metrics or these numbers that we can watch. And as we put different inputs into our system as far as engagement, or we change employee benefits, or we tweak the engagement events or things we're doing, bonuses, compensation, every 6 months, we're essentially getting a metric. Hey, are your guys and girls more engaged now than they were 6 months ago? And if they're not, then we know we're not doing something right. If they are, we know we're onto something and we need to double down on it or keep moving. So I think that's going to be a really beneficial thing, because that's something that I've always struggled with. What sort of a metric can you put on how happy are your employees? And I think Gallup's got a pretty good handle on that.
No, that's great. I mean, because I think, again, I go into a lot of companies, and a lot of people even struggle to do surveys with their clients, never mind their employees. But I think if you get your employees engaged, then usually that's seen through retention. You'll see quality of work increasing,
Productivity,
even simple things like taking care of your equipment, taking care of trucks. If employees are happier, then they're more likely going to take care of that stuff. So I think that's great. How are you planning on showing those results to your employees? Because it's all very well, we take surveys all the time, but a lot of the time we don't see the results, or we don't see the action plan towards fixing some of the issues.
Yep. Yeah. So that's a great question. And that's one of the things when we initially rolled this out, we had really low participation. The field guys especially didn't understand, like, what's the point of doing this? I don't get these some of these questions don't make sense. Do I have a best friend at work? What does it matter? Well, so we kind of had to go back around and double down and really hold some smaller group sessions, and explain how this is going to benefit them, how we're going to continue to do this, how we're going to watch these scores. And so we're actually having our first, we've got our first management meeting with Gallup to go over the results of our first survey coming up next week. We had a series of meetings then we will break it down into a series of branch level meetings where we're going to go into the shop, and we're going to go, here's exactly how we scored at every level, guys. Here's what we see. Here's what we're doing. Here's what this is based on. And then in 6 months, when we survey it, or as we make changes, which we're also going to announce a pretty major change in our PTO policy, is one of the first moves that we're making in conjunction with the first set of scores. Then every 6 months, when we get new scores, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go back and we're going to have a branch level meeting and go, okay, hey, at this particular branch, here's what we're seeing. Here's what's happening. We're seeing positive things. So we're going to, it gives you more information. I'm making it sound overly simple, but I mean, it kind of breaks down not necessarily just whether they're engaged or not, but where you're missing. Is it the relationship with the supervisor? Is it they don't feel like they have the tools they need? So it does give you some very specific things that you can attack.
Right.
And yeah, so we'll share that with the guys every 6 months. That was a commitment I made to them, and I gave every one of them my cell number, which I may regret that.
That a good idea?
Yeah, we'll see. A couple of people like, like, hey, are you sure you want to do this? I'm like, yeah, I think it's going to be okay. But yeah, I mean, that's the whole idea, is we want to know what they think, and I think for a lot of people, maybe you're scared to find out, but if you don't know, probably like you said about the customer satisfaction surveys, if you don't know, you're just guessing. You might as well know and get the bad news and start doing something about it. If there is.
Exactly. No, you actually bring up a really interesting point, man. I know obviously some details about your company in terms of you're fairly new on Aspire. Now you're doing the surveys. You joined one of the Bristol Olson Pew groups and doing the benchmarking. And you've got all this data now coming to you, which must be refreshing. Just so you have the data, you can now analyze it, you can now do things about it. How is that going to then play a part in what does Earthworks look like in 12 months, 36 months from now? Is that a whole plan to, double in size, or just become a more profitable company, or become a national company? What does that look like for Earthworks?
Yeah, a little bit of all of that. It's the primary function wasn't necessarily to achieve a specific goal, other than just stop doing things the hard way. We've learned so many things over the years, Robert, through trial and error. And there's just better ways to do it. The peer groups is a great example of that. We go in there and we've got 4 or 5 other companies who probably have dealt with exactly what we're dealing with, and have tried 2 or 3 things. Maybe they don't have a good idea on how to fix it, but they give you 3 ways not to try that they've already tried. Or they can give you, maybe a silver bullet. I've walked out of every one of our peer group meetings with an action plan of, hey, this is something we have to implement. The kind of the challenging thing is we've got all this data and all this information, and there's some of us, myself included, that want to just run down the street making changes. And now we're going to watch this, and we're going to track this, and we're going to look at this. Well, and you have to be careful with that, because then you start overwhelming the employees and the managers and things like that. So one of the things that we've actually taken a step back, even from our strategic planning, our 3rd strategic planning session, we said, hey, we were a little too aggressive. This is our first time going through this process. We set some unrealistic timetables, and we're pushing people to make too many changes too fast, and the changes aren't necessarily being fully embraced. We're not fully explaining them. They're not being as effective as they should. So we're going to slow down, and we're going to do this the right way. Once everything's accomplished and we're comfortable, we don't have private equity. We don't have an investment group that's pushing us to hit numbers. Our job is to grow the company the right way. Right. And ultimately, we will be more profitable. We've been blessed. We've been a profitable company for many years, but we'll be able to make more. We'll be able to see problems quicker. And ultimately we do have goals where, we've ended last year at a little over 34 million. And the goal was, without any acquisitions or with strictly organic growth, to hit 50 million in 5 years. I'm sorry, we were at 31 last year. Our first year goal was 34 for this year, but we're on track for about 36 or 37 as we speak. So all this stuff has really been good. And we got great employees, which makes it a lot easier.
No, that's great, Chris. I mean, I'm hats off to what you're doing with the company, and you and your team. We had a good strategic planning session there, and I love what you're doing. So, and I really appreciate you sharing all this today. And I think this is going to be really valuable for those, smaller companies, some of these new owners who are trying to get their company up over 1 million or 3 million. So, I think there's some good takeaways from them. So if people wanted to get in touch with you, Chris, and just, pick your brain a little bit, or maybe just get some initial guidance on how to steer their company, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah. And Robert, I mean this from the bottom of my heart. I absolutely, if anybody's got any questions, if anybody needs anything, please reach out. One of the most important things for me in my life at this point, we were talking a little bit before the podcast, is giving back to this industry. This industry's changed my life. It's changed my family's life. It's changed the lives of hundreds of our employees. And I actually take a lot of pride and a lot of joy in trying to help other people not make the mistakes we made. So the best way to reach out to me is most likely my email. It's Chris, CHRIS, @earth.works. Simple. There's no .com, no .net. Chris @earth.works. but please don't hesitate. I will get back with you if you reach out, and I will have a conversation. I can't promise you'll learn anything, but I'll tell you what I know.
Awesome. Chris, thank you again for your time today. I know you're a busy guy, but I really appreciate
Thanks,
your
Robert.
time, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
Yeah, see you at Elevate. Thanks, Robert.
Okay, cool. Okay, cheers. Bye-bye.
That was the Commercial Landscaper podcast hosted by Robert Clinkenbeard, and I'm the author of the Ironman Mindset for Entrepreneurs. If you want to find out more about the show, you're welcome to go to thecommerciallandscaper.com, or if you want to learn more about courses, education, buying some books, even if you want to just drop a note and suggest a guest, I'd love to hear from you. Again, this is Robert Clinkenbeard, the Commercial Landscaper podcast. Cheers, everyone.